So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the Plant Nova Natives campaign for the many of you who are probably not familiar with it, and why we decided to do a Plant Nova Trees campaign on top of that. I'm going to talk about why we're into native plants and what you can do to help with this campaign. All right, 1 second here. Let me get my screen so I can see it better. All right, so Plant Nova Natives is a collective action movement, which means that organizations that share a common goal collaborate on a single theme, and thus they're amplifying each other's messages. So in this case, over 120 Northern Virginia organizations have been participating in this huge group effort to promote the use of native plants in the landscape. It's a positive message which gives people the opportunity to make a difference in their own yards. So we're hoping that once people understand the value of native plants, they're likely to start to understand what else it takes to create a healthy landscape, such as reducing lawn area, removing invasive plants, and avoiding chemicals. The Plant Nova Natives website is a virtual how-to for native plants, with pretty much everything you need to know about why and how to plant them, where to get them, and how to find help. We recognize that of all the plants, native trees play the most important role in the ecosystem. So in September, we launched Plant Nova Trees to draw special attention to them. We are a social marketing campaign. We're not a tree planting organization. So our role is to get the word out and connect people to the resources they need to plant and take care of trees. By a happy coincidence, the Virginia Department of Forestry had been asked by the Department of Environmental Quality to plant 600,000 trees just in Northern Virginia between last October and 2025. So the reason for this is that trees prevent stormwater runoff and thus protect the Chesapeake Bay. Our efforts might be able to help the region achieve its stormwater goals. They want everyone to report the trees that are planted and the shrubs so they can keep track. And we have a reporting form on our website for that purpose. So when you're out there planting, try and remember to give us a report. That would be really helpful. Trees bring a whole lot of benefits to humans. Areas that have a lot of trees are several degrees cooler in hot weather. I know that because living in Clifton, when I drive from Burke to Clifton, and I'm watching the thermometer in my car, I can see it drop. This can be a life and death difference as our climate gets hotter. Mental health is improved by trees and the incidence of asthma is lower. Mature trees soak up thousands of gallons of water per year, which help to keep yards and basements dry. By reducing runoff, they protect our streams as well as the Chesapeake Bay. Virginia is under a mandate to reduce that runoff. Trees are an important solution to the stormwater problem caused by all our roads and parking lots and buildings and compacted lawns. The general plan for Plant Nova Trees has been to start out by reminding people with events such as this amazing Tree of Life exhibit that they love trees and all the benefits they bring us, and hopefully get them excited about working as a community on this issue. We will be gradually introducing the topic of the other layers of the ecosystem, including the shrubs and the ground layer, and what it takes to really support habitat. A big challenge is to quickly explain why a native tree is better than any other tree. So here's the explanation. We've taken what was once a rich and contiguous landscape of ecologically healthy land, and we turned it into this. What wasn't forest here in Northern Virginia was probably meadow. And now here's our idea of meadow. Essentially, we've taken it all away, scraped it off, and then in addition to concrete and brick, we've added back plants into the landscape. This scene is pretty typical of suburban landscaping. We've got the Bradford Pear, weeping cherry, Douglas fir, burning bush, privet, boxwood, Japanese holly, spruce, azaleas, turf grass. every single one of those plants comes from some other part of our globe. And the turf grass, by the way, even if it calls itself Kentucky bluegrass, for example, it is not a native plant. Our turf grass all comes from Europe. The only plants in this photo that are native, most likely, would be the canopy trees in the background. So some of these plants in our yard have a competitive advantage when transplanted into an unsuspecting ecosystem, and they end up taking over, causing horrendous damage to the trees and other plants. Many of those invasive plants are being sold in the trade still. Burning bush, nandina, vinca, Chinese silvergrass. These are all just a few examples of many, many you can see for sale. So why does it even matter when native plants are replaced by non-native ones? An easy way to understand this is to tell the story of the baby songbirds. Baby birds eat spiders and insects, mostly caterpillars. With just a few exceptions, they cannot eat seeds, nuts, or berries. Their parents might come to your bird feeder, but they can't bring the food back to their babies. And so, as it turns out, most caterpillars can only eat the plants with which they evolved. Over thousands of years, they've learned to overcome the chemicals that plants produce to prevent insects from eating them. But for the most part, this means each insect species can only digest a very few number of plant species. They cannot digest plants that come from other ecosystems. So this is true for 90% of plant-eating insects. They are plant specialists. They have to have their very few species that they depend on. So if the insects that eat plants cannot eat the plants in our landscape, the food chain is essentially broken. A world without insects is a world without biological diversity. And very specifically, it's a world without our birds, in Northern Virginia without our birds, or frogs, or toads, or any of the other critters that eat insects. And then it also will affect the animals that eat the insect-eating animals. Ultimately, the whole ecosystem depends on this relationship. Without native plants, it collapses. And by the way, without an ecosystem, human beings will collapse. Birds die by the billions because of domestic cats and window strikes. But the biggest killer of all is loss of habitat. And what do we mean by habitat loss? We mean that the natural areas were replaced by concrete, turf grass, and non-native ornamentals. This study helped us determine just how many plants are needed for birds to reproduce. It showed that neighborhoods where 70% of the biomass is native are able to support chickadee breeding. Most biomass is made up of trees. You can picture this problem. If a baby chickadee has to or let's say if the parent chickadees need to bring back 500 caterpillars a day to their nest for a couple weeks, that's a lot of caterpillars. And if those parents have to fly a really long way to find a native tree that has all those caterpillars on it, they're not going to be able to make as many trips back and forth. And so they will not be able to support their babies. And that's just the chickadees. You know, there are many, many other birds out there all trying to eat those caterpillars. Our native oaks are the best trees for the caterpillars, hosting over 530 species of caterpillars. By contrast, the ginkgo, which is a commonly planted ornamental landscaping from Asia, supports only 4 species of caterpillars. So when you're a bird in search of food for your young, that will make a life-threatening.
And then about 2.9 billion years ago, they began producing.
All right, whoever just joined us, please mute. Thank you. Okay. So of course, caterpillars are not just bird food. They turn into the moths and the butterflies that we love. So here are some examples. The spring azure, its caterpillars are hosted by the flowering dogwood, our state tree. Zebra swallowtail by the pawpaw, which I have in profusion and behind my house. I went and bought all sorts of pawpaws over the years, and then I noticed that our woods are full of them. Morning cloak, one of the earliest butterfly to come out in the spring because it overwinters as an adult, which is rather unusual. Its host is the black willow, or one of its hosts. Luna moth is hosted by sumacs. The places with the most room for trees in Northern Virginia are on private property, so most of the planting will need to be done by individual landowners. Our role is to show them why we should do it and make it as easy as for everyone as possible. We also want to help people figure out how to take care of their trees properly, and I'll get to that in a minute. And it took very little thought to realize that if we want to increase native tree canopy, urging people to plant is not enough. We must also take care of our trees after planting, and most important of all, stop killing the mature trees that are already there. What good would it do to plant 600,000 little sticks if we don't staunch the loss of big trees? And so we're giving equal emphasis to planting and preservation. So what can you do on your own property? If you don't have shade on your property, you're certainly going to need it more and more over time. If you do have big shade trees like this already, you're very lucky. But how long will they be there? Nothing lives forever. If you don't want your property to be baking hot when that tree dies, the time to plant the next one is right now, so it can start growing. Ideally, you would just pick one of the seedlings that comes up spontaneously and protect it so it can grow. It's much, much better for trees to grow them from seeds right where you want them to live. The bigger it is, the more stressful it is to transplant it. However, keep in mind that although tall trees provide shade, most tree species need full sun to grow. So you have to check on that first before you decide what to plant. Our shorter trees are designed to grow in the shade of the understory. So there are lots of choices there. Flowering dogwood is one, as opposed to the Korean Kusa dogwood. And redbuds are another obvious example. But there's several other nice but lesser known understory trees to choose among. If you've got the room, how about planting several trees? Trees don't like to be alone. They support each other and they protect each other from disease and pests. We tend to think of the best tree condition as a big open space where it can grow to its full potential. That's just a human idea. That's not actually what the trees want. They want to be in a forest. So planting several trees all at once, if you have room, is an easy way to reduce the amount of useless and hot lawn on your property and get your project going faster. The foresters tell us that there's really no difference between a tree and a shrub. Many large shrubs are just like small trees, only multi-stemmed. For those with less space, planting smaller native shrubs is also very beneficial. Native ground covers are a popular landscaping choice and are just the thing to put under trees to protect them from lawnmowers and help with erosion control. The Plant Nova Natives website lists many other ground cover options that are native. There are plenty, some of them have wonderful flowers, and so there's no reason why you need to plant non-native ground covers like English ivy and pachysandra, Japanese pachysandra. How do you take care of your trees? Please don't do what they did here. If you're growing a tree from an acorn, the only care needed during the first few years is protection from deer and lawnmowers, and possibly a couple careful prunes to make it sure it's growing in the right direction. Bare root saplings need watering when first planted, but not much after that. But bigger trees need a lot more attention. First, you need to inspect the roots of your specimen before you buy it for problems such as encircling roots that could kill it. Then a lot of water will be needed for 2 or 3 years. If the tree is doing well at that point, it's likely to be 20 years before it needs any more attention. But after that, if the tree is near a house or a walkway, it's wise to ask an arborist to inspect it every 2 years to prevent any situations that could become hazardous. We strongly recommend that you hire an independent arborist who has no financial incentive to provide pruning or to cut it down, and who is ISA certified. So now let's talk about reducing tree loss. Plants that we import from other parts of the world into our gardens can cause this horrible damage. Invasive vines are a particularly bad threat because they kill trees. Some, such as Japanese honeysuckle, wrap around the trunks and strangle the trees as they grow. This is not a great picture that I took, but this tree was brought down by the honeysuckle. Other invasive vines simply smother the trees. It's obviously a very bad idea to plant invasive plants on purpose on your property. Somebody, unfortunately, decided that Chinese wisteria would be a good idea. This is on Old Keene Mill Road. English ivy and winter creeper add weight and surface area to trees and eventually bring them down in storms or on power lines or on people's houses. You can see this right now driving around. It does tend to be the evergreens that fell over because they have more surface area in the winter, and the English ivy and winter creeper changes a deciduous tree into sort of an evergreen tree in that sense, and I see them down. The first thing to do with it is to prevent this problem is to cut the vine at the base of the tree. That's going to keep it from reproducing, because most vines will not reproduce. They don't go to seed until they get up high in the tree. We see a lot of smothered and strangled trees on public property, but it can be just as much a problem on private land and common areas and community associations. I would like to recruit every one of you to join our Tree Rescuers program. It's not very difficult. What you would do is sign up to survey your neighborhood for trees at risk and drop off a brochure for the homeowner. It's fun to do this and a great way to participate in the campaign. We have gotten very tired of standing by and watching trees die when a little bit of education and attention could save hundreds of thousands of trees. Just as much a threat to our ecosystem are non-native trees that crowd out our native trees. The Bradford Pear is a classic example. You can see it all up and down along 95 in the spring and pretty much everywhere else in Northern Virginia. Every place you see one of those trees along the highway, they all got there by themselves. And every place they are, a native tree cannot grow. So this picture really demonstrates what a huge problem this is to our native woods. At other times of years, you can see other invasive species if you know what to look for. Between them, they add up to a very significant toll on the ecosystem. It may seem counterintuitive for a tree campaign to recommend cutting down trees, but that is exactly what we're recommending. Every time they go to seed, the birds carry those seeds into our few remaining natural areas where they spread further and further. The tree of heaven, by the way, I should mention, is top priority. If you don't control it, it gets out of control very quickly and becomes very difficult to take care of. And it is the natural host plant in Asia for the spotted lanternfly, which is another invasive species which is killing trees. So if we can get rid of our tree of heavens, that may actually help a little bit with the spotted lanternfly, as well as just getting rid of the darn tree. The major strategy of our social marketing campaign is to try to make it easy for people to take action. We need maybe, I don't know, 100,000 people to take action if we really want to make the difference we seek. One might imagine that there may be that many people out there who might be willing to plant a tree or work to preserve them, but we can't expect any of them to take the time to learn anything much about native trees, other than that they're a good thing. So we're working on strategies to help them.
Native plants.
We already had relationships with 21 conventional garden centers, where over 50 of our volunteers put red stickers on the native plants. We've now added 8,000 hang tags on the native trees. That way, people don't need to know which trees are native. All they have to do is walk up and down the aisles and look for the hang tag on the trees. Or for their shrubs and other plants, just look for the little red stickers. We've tried to lay out our website to make it easy for everyone to find the resources they need. whether it be sources of trees or free services or any other help. For example, another project which we have launched is meant to prevent paralysis from giving people too much information. There are over 50 species of native trees for sale in Northern Virginia. And even I would really have trouble making a choice. And I just finished taking a tree ID course. So we've created an electronic hotline for people to get personalized advice about which native tree to buy for their location. You fill out a form describing your wishes and the planting conditions, how far from the house or overhead wires or whatever, and send us a photo of the area in question. Then a volunteer who knows about trees will email you back with 1 or 2 suggestions that meet your wishes and that also reflects what might be found in the nearby natural areas, thus helping to expand those habitats. We've created this general brochure about the value of trees, and we've ordered thousands of them. So if you have any place to give them away, please let us know. We've also ordered thousands of these Celebrate Tree stickers. We'd like to see them plastered all over Northern Virginia, on your car, laptop, water bottle, binders, recycling bins, your windows, whatever. So do you happen to frequent any small businesses that might be willing to give out stickers or brochures to their customer or put one in their window? And if you have any contacts in any of the large corporations in Northern Virginia, we'd love it if you could help us connect to them to invite them to participate in the campaign as well. Much of our publicity is geared at inspiring individuals to plant on their properties. But what about planting on a larger scale, such as in a neighborhood or a community association? This takes very dedicated volunteers to organize, but it can be done. We have 2 examples of communities that have done that on our website and tips for how to make a volunteer tree planting campaign a success. We've seen a big change in the right direction in the gardening world in the past few years. But then I look around and I notice that I can drive a mile before I see a house that has any native plants in its garden, except for, again, the canopy trees may well be. And I realize that we have a long way to go, primarily because most people don't garden at all to begin with, except maybe to put some annuals into a pot in the spring. Whatever plants came with their house, that's what gets sold with their house. We have a hugely diverse population of people with limited time on their hands and plenty of other issues that they need to worry about. So if we are really to see the needle move in time to save our local plants and wildlife and to cool our environment as it heats up, we need to mobilize everyone who has heard the message to go out and tell it to others. Plant Nova Trees is all of you, not some independent organization trying to promote itself. You can use the Plant Nova Trees hashtag. You could add a poem about trees to your automatic signature on your emails. You could put a frame around your Facebook profile photo. Which is quite easy, by the way, to do. So please, one way or the other, please show your friends and neighbors and coworkers what you're doing and encourage them to join the movement. So thank you all very much. And I mentioned that I could talk about the Audubon at Home program. This is a volunteer program in which people will come out to your house and walk your property with you and help you strategize about your landscaping goals and how you can use your property to create usable habitat for the birds and butterflies. It's totally free, it's very fun. It's fun for the volunteers. You can sign up for that on the Audubon at Home website. But if you go to the Plant Nova Natives website, it will direct you there also. So that's one of the many free resources. We're very lucky to live in this area where there's so many resources available.